Hello and welcome to Talking Golf with Gary. This week, the dynamic Gary will introduce you to all kinds of topics pertinent to this past week of golf. He'll give you some tidbits of information as what's coming up and take you on a tour around the world for all of the golfing highlights. Sit back and enjoy Talking Golf with Gary.
And hello and welcome to another edition of Talking Golf with Gary. Hope everybody had a terrific week out there. Looked like a great week in golf. Weather's getting a little cold here in the Northeast, and they're talking about the S word, and special certain areas of the Northeast already got some snow on the ground in the Midwest, so no golf getting out to be played there, but you got to take it inside and work on your game inside. Practice a little putting maybe, work on the short game, get those foam balls, and try out some of the stuff. All right, great week in golf and just the one event, so let's take a look at what happened this past week in the world of golf. Matt Kuchar overcame 3 early bogeys that cost him the lead with flawless golf and 2 key birdies on the back 9 to close with a 4 under 66 and win the Sony Open in Hawaii for his second PGA Tour title this season, having made only 1 bogey through 54 holes to build a 2-shot lead. Kuchar had the 3 bogeys in his opening 5 holes on Sunday, fell 1 shot behind Andrew Putnam, and he had to make a 10-foot birdie putt at the turn to avoid falling 2 shots behind. Kuchar caught him with an aggressive pitch up the slope on the par 4 10th. They remained tied, Putnam and Kuchar did, with 5 holes to play when Putnam made bogey from a deep bunker left of the 14th green, and Kuchar made a pair of 12-foot birdie putts on the next 2 holes to seize control. Just like that, his lead was 3 shots, making for a pleasant walk up the par 5 18th. Kuchar became the first multiple winner on a PGA Tour this season, having ended a drought of more than 4 years when he captured the Mayakoba Classic in Mexico last November. It was only the second time in his career that Kuchar has won twice in the same season. He won the Match Play Championship and the Memorial in 2013. Corey Connors of Canada, who got into the field through a Monday qualifier, had a 64-64 weekend and was among 4 players who tied for 3rd. Mark Leishman, Hudson Swafford, and Ches Reefy also finished in a tie for 3rd. And how about Davis Love III? I think he's 54 now. He first played the Sony Open in 1986. He missed by 1 shot, matching the lowest 72-hole score of his career. His 64-65 weekend gave him a tie for 7th, and he now heads off to Singapore with hopes of earning a spot in the Open Championship. So Davis Love III rebounding back, and nice to see the older guys. Matt Kuchar, who's 40 years old. Nice to see them playing well, and boy, his last couple of tournaments has been fantastic, Kuchar. His game is really coming together and is really on target. He's got the whole meat of the rest of the season to go. So could be a big year for Matt Kuchar if he keeps his head straight and his game going in the right direction. All right, that's all we got for a recap this week. A little bit more action taking place next week, but that's it for this week. So let's take a break. Got a great guest coming up tonight, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. He was a contestant on the Driver versus Driver 2, the Golf Channel show. Had his design accepted and then didn't quite make it through, but terrific guest Scott Haack, and he'll be on in just a second with me. So let's take a break and be back after this.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com.
My guest tonight is a chiropractor, an inventor, an entrepreneur, and he has been a contestant on the latest Driver versus Driver 2 on the Golf Channel. His name is Scott Haack. Scott, welcome to Talking Golf with Gary.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. It's a privilege to be on the show with you today.
Well, thank you. And Scott, how did you get started in the golf business? The inventing and for the golf business, or was it a fluke? Or you a golfer? See you with your Cleveland Browns shirt there, so we know you're a Browns fan.
Yeah. Big game Saturday night.
There you go.
That's all I'll say. But yeah, no, I was in chiropractic practice for 9 years, and I started developing products while I was in practice, and some of which were designed to help patients get better with low back pain. Others were golf products. It kind of morphed into that. My dad and I used to go to the World Series of Golf at Firestone Country Club in Akron, and we used to watch the guys warm up and then play. And I started noticing that guys were taking towels and putting them under their arm to keep that one-piece takeaway intact, or putting tees under their armpits. So I developed a product called the Core Links, which is distributed by KickX Golf, formerly known, and they still distribute under the Medicus name, the weighted or the hinged club that they have. So I developed that, and they ended up taking that over and went to market with that. So that kind of started my whole golf designing experience, and then I designed a putter too that went to market briefly.
And did you market the putter itself, or did you get some company, or?
Yeah, there was a couple people that were involved in the project with me. Joe Sergo and Brian Steimer were involved in that project with me, and we did it ourselves, which is tough. I didn't realize how tough that would be, because basically I designed this product out of a garage. We built it out of a garage. Of course, we did the CNC milling and everything else that's involved with that. But distribution and, that whole thing, it's tough. And you're up against the big boys, so you're trying to get your name out there. But what was nice is we got it in Golf Illustrated, and they did a head-to-head test with that putter versus the 27 putters that were on the market at the time, the top 27 putters. And it finished 7th out of 27 putters. And what's interesting is the Wilson Staff Kirk Curry 3 putter finished just one spot ahead of us. So who knew that like 12 years later I would, be on their show.
Now, do you still use that putter?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I'm left-handed. I do everything right-handed, but I golf left-handed. Which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But we had to make a left-handed putter for me.
All right. Well, so you mentioned the show, and how did that whole driver versus driver thing come about? How did you get on the show, and?
Yeah, so I didn't see the first series or the first year of that particular show. I don't know how I missed that, but I did. But I was working as a senior director of R&D for a medical device company, and the director of engineering just sent me a link and said, hey, I don't know if you heard about this. Pretty cool. He was expecting me to just be interested in watching it, not necessarily, submitting an application to be on the show. And mind you, the application deadline was 6 days later,
My goodness.
So I had a couple designs I was working on at the time. One was a more traditional design that I thought, I could possibly win with that design, but I could possibly not get on the show too. It was a wide spectrum. Then I had this radical design that I thought, that'll probably get me on the show, but depending on where the industry is at the time, it could get me kicked off the show pretty quick too, But if a company's ready for a radical change, then this could be it, So I thought I'm going to go with the radical design because my first goal was to get on the show. Period.
Right.
Yeah. And then if I just happen to make it to the end, well, great. But my first goal was to get on the show. So I thought that had a good shot of getting me on the show for good and maybe bad reasons,
Yeah. So how did they go about making the choice? What was the procedures you had to go through? I mean, you filled out an application. I think you had to send in a video as well.
Right. Correct.
Yeah,
we had to go through the whole design process and submit the design, submit a video of us explaining the product in detail, and had to go through a series of, they would send us a format to which we would answer questions, basically ask ourselves questions and answer it ourselves, submit those in, see how we handled those particular, that particular assignment. And then we went from there. I had 6 days to put this whole thing together. So it was like, oh my goodness gracious. I did a lot of work in those 6 days, especially on that first weekend. I don't think my family saw me at all. But what was interesting, like a month later, we were in Hawaii. We had never been to Hawaii. This was our first trip to Hawaii. I just got done scuba diving, which, scuba diving in Hawaii, I don't know if it gets much better than that.
All right.
We get back in the car and I get an email message that I'm in the running to be one of the, finalists for Driver versus Driver 2. I thought, I don't know if it gets much better than this today, is that I just went scuba diving in Hawaii and I got a notice that I might be on the show.
So you went with the radical design Downforce, I believe it was called.
Downforce, yes, correct.
And it didn't get the best of likes. I'm trying to be nice here.
No. Exactly.
It wasn't that well received. Is that fair to say?
It is, yeah. And I kind of knew that going in. I thought if Wilson is ready for a radical change to what they have, this could make it all the way to the end. But if not, I could be cut early. I kind of knew that going in. Tim Clark didn't like it at all. Jeremy Roenick didn't like it at all. But Rick Shields was intrigued.
Right.
He said, I'd love to try it. I think it's got merit. If it doesn't work, then I'll chuck it out of my bag as fast as I put it in. But he was interested in the concept. So it was kind of a non-conforming product that you could make conforming.
Okay.
So basically you could increase your club head speed outside of the USGA events, which increases muscle memory. And then if you're in a USGA event, you could put the channel blockers in, and your club head speed is still going to be higher because your muscle memory is that much higher.
So it was sort of like a training aid / driver built into one.
Correct. Yeah, from that standpoint, just to build up your muscle memory and that club head speed. And let's face it, most golfers don't play in USGA sanctioned events. So to be able to go out and hit the ball a country mile in front of your friends is always a good thing, You don't
happen to have an extra one laying around.
Yeah, right. I got it in a glass case sitting over there.
Now, when you went to give this pitch and everything, which we saw on television, did you have did you have a prototype? Did you have to have one made, or did Wilson make one for you?
Wilson made one as well. I also had one produced with a local company here in town just to get an idea of taking it off the computer and getting a 3D model just to see what it looked like as well. So yeah, I made one. I came to the production of the show with my own 3D model.
So how is that like? I mean, you're in a room with all the other competitors, and were you guys swapping any designs, or is everybody top secret? Or?
No, everybody's top secret at that point. Yeah, no one's revealing anything. We're just we're getting to know people as human beings, and I tell you, everybody on that show, this is just life. Most of the time, when you're in a room with a bunch of people, there's a couple people that are just not your cup of tea. It's just, that's life. That doesn't mean they're bad or good people. It just means, this is life.
Yeah.
Everybody there was phenomenal. I mean, all the contestants, everybody that was involved in the production of the show, it was just first class all the way. It was great.
Now, when you get into it a little bit, and you I'll ask that a little bit later. But so you went on the first show, didn't get the most favorable reviews by the guys, and I'm forgetting my chronology, but you made it to the next show, I believe, and then they gave you a choice.
Yeah.
To stay solo and probably leave the show, or to team up with other designers. What was that like, being told that, really they thought you should team up with somebody, and what was the process that you went through to make your decision?
Yeah, sure. So they cut some people from the first episode,
Right.
and then there was the second episode that they thought if a couple teams, either individuals or teams, were to pair up, that might make an even better driver. So I was involved in that grouping, that they thought that I would pair well with what was the Black Hornet team with Juan and Walter. And everybody had their own individual pairing that Wilson and Golf Channel thought that would mesh well together. So what they did was they had us go into a room, view a video, and then decide whether or not we wanted to pair up with those individuals or not. And you wrote down yes or no, and then it played out for everybody to see on the show. And we were the only two groups that actually said yes. Juan and Walter said yes, they'd like to pair with me. And I said, yes, I'd like to pair with them. But we didn't know till we were actually on the set.
Right.
And it paired out, it functioned how it was supposed to in front of everybody. And so I didn't know what they were going to say. I thought they might go at it alone, which is fine,
Yeah.
I thought there was a couple features that I had that might make their product a little bit better. And luckily, in the end, they said yes, I said yes, and we moved on.
So how nerve-wracking was that, sitting there? Because you've got to be thinking that if they say no, I have a good chance of leaving the show, right?
Sure.
And, if they say yes, then it's okay. I'm going to be here for at least another week. And if they say no, I'm going home. So what was you're sitting there, as this is unfolding, what's racing through your mind at that time?
Well, what's racing through my mind is this is pretty cool that I get to play in this little swerve on TV that you see it happen with other people on TV. You just never think it's going to be you. So I was pretty comfortable with it. I knew in the end that this could be my fate, that I would go home early. I chose to pick the radical design instead of the traditional design to submit, and I knew that was a possibility. So when it came to light that we had a chance to pair up, I thought maybe this is my chance now to go traditional with my radical design and maybe make it to the end. So I thought if they say yes, I thought we had a pretty good shot of making it down the road to the finish line.
And I believe one or two guys did go home that episode, and they decided to stay solo, right?
Right, correct. Yeah, there was a couple guys on the show that actually Tim and Jeremy and Rick Shields thought if they paired up that they would have a good shot of even winning it. That was one of the statements they made on the show, and they decided to go at it alone. And Tim Swiss ended up moving on, and then he got cut in the next episode, and then we were cut right after that.
So you go, now you're to the next, and again, I think there's 6 or 7 episodes to the season, but this played out much longer than that, I would imagine, right? I mean,
yeah, correct.
You guys couldn't just come up with it. Well, here we go, and an hour later we got 3 designs, and here you go.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that at all. I mean, we did our filming in Chicago at Wilson headquarters in September, And then we didn't come back until January, and we were actually in Orlando at that point. They made the set look like we were in Chicago, but we were actually in Orlando. And then when we got cut, the rest of the guys that were still in the running went on to the PGA merchandise show, and you saw that play out in the next episode. Then,
right. Now, so you make it to the next show, and I believe there was a pro demo day in there, right? And then you got a pro. Let's back up a second. You met with the other team, and you went through you combined your designs. Take us backstage. Take us into those meetings. What was that like? Was there any bits of uncomfortableness, or did you guys just gel right away? Or did somebody say, "Oh, I think that's a stupid idea," or anything like that?
No, well, actually, Juan and Walter, two phenomenal guys. I mean, Juan is an incredible industrial designer, graphic designer. Walter is a golf pro. So those two guys were phenomenal to work with. They were just some of the nicest guys I've ever met in my entire life. The part that's a little bit unnerving is they announce it that, okay, now you guys are pairing. You got an hour to come up with a design. And that's real. It wasn't like we had 5 hours to go and collaborate and then they filmed that segment. We actually went and we had an hour. That's one of the true statements on the show. We had an hour to combine our designs and not really talk about it too much except with what they filmed. Right. So it was like, I think this could work. I think that could work. I think if we combine these two things, it's got a great story. And that's what we ended up doing. And then I became, I guess, the mouthpiece for the product then when we collaborated back on the show for them to film that segment and explaining what we were going ahead with.
And what concepts of yours made it in, and what concepts did they keep? And you kept the name, which was interesting. You didn't come up with a different name.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little
They
bit
kept
about
their They kept their Black Hornet. We kept that name because we thought that was a better name. Downforce kind of went with a couple of the features that I had built into my driver, so that was kind of antiquated at that point in time. So we went with Black Hornet. We combined. They had a top crown that we thought might not meet the requirements of the USGA. So we went with, I had a stacked head design, which was basically a smaller head stacked into a larger head that would basically zero in your strike zone when you make contact. Because a lot of drivers, they have just a thin line or maybe just a little wider line like the last gentleman had on Driver versus Driver 1. But no one had something that was symbolic of golf that might draw your eyes to that particular area and maybe minimize off-center hits. So we combined that to the crown of their driver just as a visual aid, an enhanced visual aid to be able to make contact with the ball a little bit easier. We kept the weighting system. We actually made the weighting system a little bit larger, actually added to the weight design. And then we added some features because I had some deep grooves into the sole to be able to distribute wind or distribute air a little bit better. So we added that into the product as well to give it a little bit more aerodynamic shape.
Okay. So it seems like there was a lot of your design.
In an hour.
In an hour, yeah. So who was the drawer? Who came up with the plans?
Yeah, I did a lot of talking. Their engineers made changes because they were the ones that were going to have to come up with the next stage was the 3D printed models that you saw on the show, where a bunch of the PGA pros that are under contract with Wilson would later hit then. But Juan, being such a great graphic designer, just drew some things up really quick.
Oh, okay.
And we were able to build upon everything that we were proposing. We were able to build upon that just because of the engineers and Juan's ability to draw really, really well.
And how was it working with the Wilson engineers? I mean,
they're great.
Wilson for years was really a top brand, and then they kind of I don't know what happened. I guess they didn't spend the money or whatever, and all these other companies grew up and spent millions of dollars on tour players, and Wilson kind of went down, and now it seems like they're on a rebound.
Correct. Yeah. From the standpoint, I mean, Wilson is really known now, of course, is in the tennis industry. I mean, that's that's their main impetus of what they do. But you're right. Back in the '80s and that sort of thing, early '90s, they were known in the golf realm, and then didn't keep up with the competition in that sort of in that way. And I think that's why they came out with the driver versus driver TV show and teaming up with Golf Channel, just to show that, hey, you know what? We've got a lot of talented people here within these four walls. Let's showcase them, and let's showcase our ability to come up with new products as well. And reaching out to the guys that play, and reaching out to the industrial designers and the graphic designers, and see what new and unique concepts they have, and roll that into what we're doing. And I think they did a wonderful job with that TV show.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look behind the scenes, as well as how this kind of thing can get developed, and and of course, though they get some free development from bringing people in.
Yeah, right. Unless you win, then they got to pay out. Right.
So you go to the demo day, and you get the prototypes. That had to be exciting when they walk out with your prototypes. And how did the angst, if any, of the demo day? What was that like for you? And
we didn't make it to the demo day in Orlando.
Okay.
What we made it to was the 3D printed model,
right?
That the PGA Tour pros were able to hit. Yeah. So what they did is they filmed those guys hitting those models.
Yes. Okay.
And then showed us the video, and got our opinion on it, and they showed what happened during that particular time with those PGA pros. So what was phenomenal was being able to see a 3D printed model being used before they went to a first article or a production model. And what was interesting is our 3D printed model was the only 3D printed model to produce a smash factor above a 1.5. No one was able to do that with the 3D printed model. Now, you saw smash factors above 1.5 with a couple guys, with Jimmy and the winner Evan with his Cortex driver. You saw 1.5 smash factors with the first article and the production models, but you didn't see that with the 3D printed model.
Right.
Ours was the only one to be able to produce that smash factor above a 1.5 at that particular time. So I thought, at least at that point, we had a good shot of moving on, because it was solid from a standpoint of being able to produce what we thought it would produce.
Right. But apparently they felt otherwise, and
right.
You guys were eliminated. And did they go? What's the elimination process like? I mean, did they? What's the criteria? I mean, your numbers look pretty good and everything, and yet you got eliminated. Did they explain to you why they thought it was not up to par, or?
No, I think what it comes down to is what they think they can sell, and I think with a lot of the movable weight technology that's on the market, in being able to create a slide groove weight that you can actually change the fade and the draw bias, instead of just having fixed weights that are positioned in the driver head and having the ability to slide them to a certain point. was intriguing to them to be able to go up against the competition that was out there at the time, which Evan's driver that ended up winning the Cortex followed that same principle once they got in with the engineers a little bit further, that they were able to take that to the next level. And that's what they wanted. They had in mind what they wanted to produce and sell. And I think they let the show play out. But from that standpoint, they looked at it and said, you know, what can we sell? And I think the three products that you saw in the end with Tim, Slama, and Jimmy and Evan, those were the three that they thought they could sell the best.
And so you're off and devastated with
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. But understood. I understood, though, where they were coming from. It's not that I didn't. I just thought when we produced that smash factor above 1.5 and no one had come close to that, I thought we had a good shot of moving on, since that was just a 3D printed model. It wasn't a production model at all. Right. So if it showed that ability in a 3D printed model, just think what it could be in a production model.
Right. It's going to be even higher and
yeah,
you know, much better for you guys. So now, having designed and marketed a putter by yourself, is this obviously this would be an easier way to do it, to have a company behind you such as Wilson?
Sure, absolutely, and that's kind of why I went down this road, because of my experience with the putter and just seeing. You don't know until you get into it, until you get into the weeds, how tough it is to actually sell something like this, especially in a highly competitive market like golf. You know, when you're younger, and I was a lot younger at the time, you think to yourself, yeah, we can go up against Ping and we can go up against TaylorMade, and you know, but their production budget and their R&D budget are off the charts. So you're never going to be able to keep up with them. So realized that pretty quick once we went into market, and also from a production standpoint, just because you can design a really cool product. And at the time, this was the first U-shaped putter on the market. So no one had designed a putter that was in the shape of a U shape, where you could actually interchange the flange in the middle of the putter to heavier, lighter, that sort of thing, and then be able to take the weights and position them outside the body of the putter. So it had a lot of unique features, but the tolerances were pretty tight too. So at the time, and we could have improved on this, but for every 5 we produced, we had to scrap 5.
Right.
So that's not good when you're trying to make money, you know?
Yeah,
so
that doesn't work too good.
So that went by the wayside. But we got in the magazines and we sold some putters and we got some good feedback on it.
All right. Well, maybe you can resurrect the idea sometime in the future.
Yeah, maybe. I'm actually working on an iron concept that I came up with in the 2006 timeframe, and I'm actually talking with a larger, well-respected company right now about it. We're supposed to meet over the holidays, so it should be interesting.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And if that goes through, I hope you'll come back on again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd love to do that. We'll see what happens. You never know where the company's vision and what they want to accomplish in the market, if that aligns with where you're at the time. And it might not, and it might not go anywhere, which is fine. But you know what? If you're not out there and you're not talking to the people, then your chances of moving on are slim to, well, they're none, because you're not talking to anybody. So you got to accept no probably 1,000 times before you get that yes, you know.
So are you still looking at do you still have the driver design kicking around? Maybe you're going to combine the Radical with
yeah. No, I'm done with the Radical now. I got on TV, so that was my goal. Maybe for all the wrong reasons, but as you know, and you've been around a long time with this, the golf industry is a purist industry. Mm-hmm. So making a change of that degree is difficult. And so if I had to pursue another driver design, I would go after it with my more traditional design.
Mm-hmm. There you go. That's probably the better thing to do. So you mentioned about you talking to another company about an iron design. Any thoughts towards driver versus driver 3 if it comes up?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where Wilson is at the time, and I think if they're satisfied with the Cortex design and accomplished what they wanted to accomplish, I think they might be done with that show.
Oh.
However, if they feel like they can build off that, and it makes good business sense, then you might see a driver versus driver 3. And at that point, then I'll probably go down the traditional road and still submit a design to see what they think.
Because I think there was a guy that was on the first season, correct?
Yeah, Jimmy. He made it to the top 3 again. Great guy, wonderful guy. But yeah, he was with a team before Long Beach. There were a bunch of engineers that really hadn't played golf before in their lives, but came up with a really cool concept that made it to the top, I believe, 3 last time, and he made it to the top 3 by himself this time again.
Wow, that's terrific. So,
Yeah.
The Cortex was the winner. What did you think of that design? And in general, what did you think of the whole whole driver?
Well, I thought it was great at the time, and I thought if they could create visibility, because it was more of a transparent design in that you couldn't really see the technology. It was built within the context of the driver to make it lighter and create club head speed. If they could bring it out in front of the customer a little bit more, that people would migrate towards it. That product always produced great numbers, especially when they went to the first article and then the more production model. You saw the actors and the athletes that are pretty good drivers, pretty good golfers, be able to hit that drive really well with that particular club. It was always pretty high. So you saw that technology worked, but it's kind of got to smack the customer in the face when they walk into a sporting goods store, and I think they were able to accomplish that then. It's a great looking club.
Yeah, well, it's drivers are funny. It starts with the looks, and then sound is a big thing with
Sounds huge.
Well.
Yeah.
It's got to sound right. If it doesn't sound right, people don't like it. Doesn't matter how you can hit the ball 300 yards. I think some people would say, I don't like the sound of that, but
Yeah, exactly. And Jeremy Roenick really harped on that a lot. And he didn't care if he could hit it, 300 yards. If it sounded like it was broke,
yeah.
He didn't want any part of it. I think, his hair stood up on end a couple times on the show.
So, what was your interaction? Is there any interaction, should I say, beyond what we saw on television with the hosts, and what was that like?
It was honestly behind the scenes. It was great. I mean, Jeremy Roenick, being such an iconic figure in NHL hockey. Every time I walk by him, I'd say, "All right, who was the best goaltender you ever faced?" Where's what city has the toughest crowd? Who is the toughest guy in the NHL that you wouldn't want to fight? I had a battery of questions that I would walk by and ask him. Rick Shields was probably the nicest guy. He was just a real down to earth guy, and he provided a lot of insight behind the scenes, and that you could sit down and talk with. And Tim Clark, he's the president of Wilson, and I mean, he's doing something right because he's been there for 25 years. I mean, most CEOs are not at a given company for that long. Usually they do their tour of duty and they're out. But he's been there a long time. So that really lets you know that he's doing something right at Wilson.
Okay, that's great. And where can technology go with these golf clubs? I mean, how much further can I don't even know if I can put it into words. What can we do? I mean, how far can technology take this?
Yeah, I think it's as far as the golf industry is willing to allow it to go. And I think that's where, and that's where it comes down to what I presented on driver versus driver. There's a point to which if it looks too radical, people are going to migrate away from it. And maybe it's great technology, and maybe it's going to really help that average golfer become a decent golfer. But I think the industry has to be ready for something like that to adopt it and be able to move forward. Until then, I'm not sure. I think there's a point to which it can go, but I think there's a ceiling right now. I think if they open the doors a little bit and that ceiling gets a little bit higher and they start adopting new and unique techniques, or at least designs on that particular club, I think it'll progress further. But the industry has got to be willing to adopt a more non-traditional type club.
It's interesting that you say that because, a few years ago, Nike and Callaway both came out with a square driver. And, I thought that'd be great design, and yet we haven't seen that kind of faded out, and they went back to the traditional looking driver.
Correct. And I mean, Tim Clark spoke about that on the show as well, because a couple guys came in with, I think it was JD that actually came in with a more square looking product, and he didn't migrate towards that one because that product had failed in the marketplace. And that's where it comes back to what you asked initially is, how far can we go? Well, how far we're going to allow it to go. And maybe that square driver produced great results, but maybe it just didn't look right on setup. And guys were like, you know what, my eyes aren't drawn to where I need them to be drawn. And, when I make my swing, it feels weird because of that square head. Maybe it didn't at all, but it's all perception.
Right.
But perception can become reality in that regard, and maybe that's why it didn't work.
Right. And then it all goes back to the sound again too. I mean, the sound really doesn't mean anything, but if it sounds good, people will buy it or like it
right.
At least.
Exactly, and that's when you saw some deviations from that pear-shaped design. You started hearing a different sound,
right?
Even subtly. Jimmy's was a little bit different from the pear-shaped design, and a lot of the guys, throughout the show said, if you could change the shape a little bit, I would migrate towards it a little bit more. And he stuck to his guns and said, hey, you know what? This is an innovation show. If you want a pear-shaped driver, there's plenty of those out there for you. This one's different, Exactly. So again, it comes back to, if the consumer is going to say, hey, look, we want something different, you need to come up with something different. I think that's when the industry will grow a little bit more.
Well, Scott, this has been just a blast. I really enjoyed it, and I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I want to wish you all the best of luck with your upcoming meetings, and I hope we can talk again in the future.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Gary. And if this goes through with this company, we'll come back on and talk irons instead of drivers.
All right. That'll be great. That'll be great. I'm sure everybody will enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the invite.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. And like I said, you got my number or my email, my number. Just drop me a line and let me know what's going on, and I'll be glad to have you on again. I really enjoyed it. This was a blast.
No, I appreciate it. I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thanks.
Go Browns.
Sponsor an ad on the podcast. Support our show and let people know about your business. Email us today.
Now it's time to do the calendar. Now it's time to do the calendar. Oh, hooray, let's sing the calendar. Now it's time to do the calendar.
All right, on the calendar for next week is the PGA Tour has the Desert Classic, with John Rahm is defending and should have a pretty good field. Phil Mickelson will be there and a host of others. And as I said, John Rahm will be there to defend his title. And the European Tour sees some action. They'll be in Abu Dhabi, and they will be playing the Abu Dhabi HSBC Championship presented by EGA. That takes place next week or this upcoming week. And the LPGA Tour is going to make an appearance, and they will be playing the Diamonds Resorts Tournament of Champions presented by IOA, and that is in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. And that was an event that a lot of celebrities involved, and used to be, I think, on the Champions Tour, and now the LPGA Tour took that event over. But that should be interesting, and we'll have that to report on next week as they will be playing that this upcoming week. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. I want to thank my guest, Scott Haack, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I want to thank you for listening. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, wherever you listen or watch the podcast. Hit the subscribe button. That helps me grow the show and expand to new listeners. And until next time, remember, as you walk down the fairway of life, you must smell the roses, for you only get to play one round. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next time.